She stood in the doorway of my home office, arms crossed, that look on her face I'd seen 1,000 times before but never really understood until it was too late. The look that said she was about to deliver a line she'd been rehearsing. The light from the hallway cut across her silhouette, and for a second I thought maybe this was one of those moments where she'd surprise me with something good. Dinner reservations. A weekend plan. Something that reminded us why we'd signed up for this in the first place. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Instead, she said it. Carlo, I deserve better than this. I didn't look up from the spreadsheet immediately. I let the words settle in the air between us like dust after demolition. Then I closed the laptop slowly, leaned back in my chair, and met her eyes with the kind of calm that comes from years of managing expectations in a job where one miscalculation costs you everything. You do, I said. She blinked. That wasn't the response she expected. I could see the gears turning behind her expression, trying to figure out if I was agreeing to change or agreeing to let go. I didn't clarify. I just nodded once and opened the laptop again like we were done. She left the doorway without another word. That was 3 weeks ago, and if you'd asked me then whether I saw it coming, I would have said no. But that would have been a lie I told myself to stay functional. The truth is I'd been seeing it for months. I just didn't have a name for it yet. My name is Carlo, and I'm a senior systems analyst for a mid-sized logistics firm that handles supply chain operations for half the retail companies you've probably shopped at. It's not glamorous. It's spreadsheets and optimization models and conference calls where someone always forgets to mute. But it pays well, it's stable, and I'm good at it because I understand patterns. I see when things don't add up. When a number sits wrong in a column or a timeline doesn't match the data, I catch it. That skill kept me employed through 2 recessions and 3 corporate restructures. It also made me the worst kind of husband to lie to. Her name was Isabel. We met 7 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding where I was seated at the singles table like some kind of charity case and she was a bridesmaid who looked bored with the whole production. We bonded over bad speeches and overcooked chicken. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveled twice a month, always had her calendar color-coded in her inbox at 0. She was organized in a way that felt like compatibility. 2 people who liked systems, who appreciated structure, who didn't do chaos. We got engaged after a year, married 6 months later in a ceremony that was elegant and efficient and made everyone say we were the couple that had it together. For a long time, maybe we did. We bought a townhouse in a neighborhood where people jog at dawn and put their trash bins back the same day. 2 bedrooms, 1 office, a small backyard I never used but she insisted we needed. She decorated. I paid. She hosted dinners for her work friends. I showed up on time with wine. We had a routine. Weekday mornings she made coffee while I showered. Weekends I handled breakfast while she went to spin class. We split chores down the middle, kept separate accounts for personal spending, joint account for bills. It worked because neither of us had to guess. But somewhere in year 5, the system started showing cracks I didn't want to see. It began with scheduling conflicts that didn't make sense. She'd tell me she had a client dinner on Thursday, and I'd add it to our shared calendar. Then Thursday would come and she'd be home by 7 saying the dinner got moved. Except the calendar never updated. I'd check my phone later and the entry would still say client dinner, no edits, no notes. The first time it happened I figured she forgot to change it. The second time I thought maybe she didn't want to bother. By the 5th time I stopped asking. Then came the phone habits. Isabel had always been glued to her phone because of work. Emails at all hours, calls during dinner, texts that needed immediate responses because some doctor's office was short on samples or a regional manager needed a presentation by morning. I got used to it. But what I didn't get used to was the way she started turning her phone face down on every surface. Counters, tables, the arm of the couch. Always face down. Always just out of my line of sight. When I'd walk into a room, she'd flip it over casually like she'd been doing it forever, but I noticed because noticing is what I do. One night in late April, I was loading the dishwasher while she sat at the kitchen island scrolling through something on her screen. I glanced over her shoulder without meaning to and saw a message preview before she swiped it away. It said, "Confirmed for Saturday, looking forward to it," followed by an emoji I couldn't make out before her thumb cleared the notification. She didn't react. Didn't flinch. Just kept scrolling like nothing had happened. I rinsed a plate and put it in the rack. "Who's Saturday with?" I asked. She looked up, eyebrows raised like I'd asked her to solve a calculus problem. "What?" "You just got a message about Saturday. Confirmation for something." "Oh," she said lightly, tapping her nails on the counter. "That's Rachel. We're doing brunch and a spa thing. Girls' Day." Rachel was her college roommate who lived 2 states away and visited maybe twice a year. The last time they'd done anything together was Thanksgiving, and it wasn't a spa day. It was a chaotic dinner at Rachel's parents' house where Isabel complained the entire drive home about dry turkey. I didn't say that. I just nodded and finished loading the dishes. That Saturday, she left the house at 10 in the morning wearing athleisure and carrying a tote bag I'd never seen before. She kissed me on the cheek and said she'd be back by 5. I said have fun and watched her pull out of the driveway in her sedan, the same one she always drove, the same route she'd take toward the highway. I spent the day cleaning the garage, which is what I do when I need to think without interruption. I reorganized toolboxes, labeled bins, threw out paint cans that had been sitting there since we moved in. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. "Running late, stopping by the outlet mall with Rachel, probably home by 7. I replied with a thumbs up and went back to sorting screws. She came home at 8:30 smelling like expensive lotion and carrying 2 shopping bags from stores I'd never heard of. Her hair was different, blown out and smooth in a way that doesn't happen from a casual spa day. She set the bags down, stretched her arms over her head, and sighed like she'd just finished a marathon. "How is it?" I asked. "Amazing," she said, pulling off her sneakers. "Rachel says hi. We should have her visit soon." "We should," I agreed. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't mention what treatments she got or what they talked about or why she smelled like a department store fragrance counter instead of eucalyptus and steam. She just grabbed the bags, went upstairs, and I heard the shower start a few minutes later. I opened our shared calendar on my phone. Saturday was blank. No brunch, no spa, no Rachel. I checked her location sharing, which we'd both enabled years ago for safety when she traveled for work. It showed her phone had been downtown all afternoon, near the business district where the boutique hotels cluster around corporate offices and restaurants with wait lists. Nowhere near the outlets. Nowhere near a spa. I didn't confront her. I saved a screenshot of the location history and closed the app. That's when I started paying attention differently. Not with suspicion, but with the same focus I bring to work when data doesn't align. I wasn't looking to catch her. I was looking to understand the pattern. The pattern became obvious fast. She started going to the gym more. 3 times a week became 5, then 6. She'd leave at 6 in the morning and come back an hour and a half later with wet hair and a protein shake. Except one morning I was up early for a call with the overseas team, and I saw her gym bag sitting on the bench in the mudroom when she came home. I watched her walk past it, go upstairs, and come back down 10 minutes later to grab it and toss it in the laundry. The bag was light. Too light for sneakers and a change of clothes. I checked it later after she left for work. Inside was a pair of running shoes that weren't dirty and a water bottle that wasn't empty. She wasn't going to the gym. She was going somewhere for 90 minutes and calling it a workout. Then there were the work trips. Isabel traveled for her job, always had. Regional conferences, client presentations, training seminars in cities I'd never visit. She'd pack her roller bag, print her boarding pass, kiss me goodbye at the door, and text me when she landed. It was routine. But in June, the routine shifted. She had a conference in Denver that was supposed to be 3 days, Wednesday through Friday. She left on schedule, sent the usual texts, called me Thursday night to complain about the hotel mattress. Then Friday afternoon, she texted saying her flight got delayed and she wouldn't be home until Saturday morning. I opened the airline's website and checked the flight status using her confirmation number, which I had because we kept a shared folder for travel documents. The flight wasn't delayed. It left on time and arrived on time. I checked her location. Her phone showed her still in Denver, but not at the airport. It was pinging from a residential area 15 miles south of downtown. She came home Saturday at noon with her suitcase and a story about sitting on the tarmac for 2 hours and missing her connection. She looked tired, but not in the way you look tired from sleeping in an airport. She looked like someone who'd stayed up late doing something that mattered. I didn't ask questions. I took a screenshot of the flight status and her location ping and added them to a folder on my laptop labeled Budget Analysis, which was boring enough that she'd never open it if she used my computer. By July, I had a collection. 12 screenshots, 6 calendar inconsistencies, 4 location mismatches, and 1 credit card statement I'd pulled from our joint account that showed charges I didn't recognize. A florist in the business district. A restaurant we'd never been to. A wine bar she told me she went to with coworkers after a presentation, except the charge was for 2 glasses at 11 at night on a Thursday when she'd texted me saying she was exhausted and going to bed early. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt like an auditor reviewing someone else's books and finding gaps that needed explanation. Maybe there were explanations. Maybe I was wrong. But the numbers didn't lie, and numbers were the only thing I trusted. The breaking point came in the middle of August. We were supposed to have dinner with her parents. They lived an hour north in a retirement community where everyone drives golf carts and complains about the restaurant serving times. Her dad liked me because I didn't talk much and I fixed his computer once. Her mom tolerated me because I made Isabel happy, or at least I used to. We'd committed to the dinner 2 weeks in advance. It was on the shared calendar, highlighted in blue, with a note that said leave by 4 to avoid traffic. The morning of, Isabel came downstairs in a robe and poured herself coffee. She leaned against the counter and said, in the same tone she'd used to mention we were out of milk, that she couldn't make it to dinner. I looked up from my toast. Why not? Something came up at work, she said. I have to meet a client. On a Saturday. It's a big account. They're only available today. I wiped my hands on a napkin and stood up. You told me about this 2 weeks ago. It's been on the calendar. Your parents are expecting us. She sipped her coffee and looked at me over the rim like I was being unreasonable. I know, Carlo. I feel bad. But this is important. You can go without me. Tell them I'm sorry. I'm not going alone to have dinner with your parents while you work. Then cancel, she said, setting the mug down harder than necessary. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I don't know what you want me to say. This is my job. It's not optional. I stared at her for a long moment, and in that moment I made a decision I didn't announce out loud. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to guilt her or demand proof or ask follow-up questions. I was going to let her go, and I was going to see where she actually went. Fine, I said. I'll cancel. She looked relieved. Thank you. I'll make it up to them. She went upstairs to get ready. I texted her mom with an apology and a lie about Isabel having a work emergency. Then I opened the tracking app on my phone, made sure her location was still shared, and waited. She left at noon wearing a dress I bought her last Christmas, heels she only wore for special occasions, and perfume that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She said she'd probably be out until 6, kissed me on the forehead, and walked out the door like she was heading into a business meeting. I gave her a 10-minute head start. Then I got in my car and drove. I didn't follow her directly. I used the tracking app to see which direction she was heading and took parallel streets to stay behind. She went south toward the downtown area, the same area her phone had pinged from before, the same area where all the unexplained charges had come from. She parked in a garage attached to a hotel. Not a chain hotel. One of the boutique places with a lobby bar and a rooftop terrace and a reputation for hosting people who want to be seen but not recognized. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. The hotel lobby was open concept, all windows and modern furniture and soft lighting that made everything look like a movie set. I stood outside near a planter box where I could see through the glass without being obvious. And there she was. Sitting in a low armchair near the bar, legs crossed, laughing at something someone across from her had said. The someone was a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, suit without a tie, the kind of grooming that costs money to maintain. He leaned forward when he talked, and she leaned in when she listened, and the space between them was the kind of space people leave when they're pretending to be professional but aren't. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos through the glass. Wide shot of the lobby, close shot of her face, closer shot of both of them together with the timestamp visible in the corner. Then I walked back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and didn't start the engine for 20 minutes. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't devastated. I was confirmed. When I got home, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I labeled it Final Documentation and moved everything from budget analysis into it. The screenshots, the calendar gaps, the credit card charges, the location mismatches, the photos from today. I organized them by date, added notes in a separate document explaining each discrepancy, and saved everything to an encrypted cloud drive with a password she'd never guess. Then I called my lawyer. His name was Ernesto, and I'd worked with him once before on a contract dispute for a freelance gig. He was sharp, no nonsense, and expensive in a way that meant he didn't waste your time. I told him I needed a consultation about marriage dissolution, and he fit me in the following Tuesday. When Isabel came home that night at 7:30, I was on the couch watching a documentary about logistics failures in the shipping industry. She dropped her purse on the table and sighed dramatically. That was exhausting, she said. Client wanted to renegotiate terms for an hour and a half. I need a drink. She poured herself wine and sat next to me, curling her legs under her like we were about to have a cozy evening together. How's your day? She asked. Productive, I said. She smiled and sipped her wine. I'm glad one of us had a good day. I kept my eyes on the screen. Me too. Tuesday came and I met Ernesto in his office downtown, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that made you feel like you were being billed by the minute just for sitting. He listened while I explained the situation without emotion. I showed him the documentation folder on my laptop. He scrolled through it slowly, nodding occasionally, making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against his chin. This is thorough, he said. You've done half my job for me. I like to be prepared. He smiled. I can see that. So what's your goal here, Carlo? Clean break? Alimony considerations? Division of assets? Clean, I said. I don't want to fight. I want it done quickly and I want to move on. Do you own property together? The townhouse. Both names on the mortgage. Joint account for bills, separate accounts for personal. No kids. He made more notes. This is straightforward. If she doesn't contest, we can have papers drafted and filed within 2 weeks. If she fights, it'll take longer. She won't fight, I said. He raised an eyebrow. You sound sure. I am. He set his pen down and looked at me directly. Let me ask you something. Do you want her to know this is coming, or do you want it to be a surprise? I thought about that question longer than I should have. Then I thought about the look on her face when she stood in my office doorway and said she deserved better. The certainty in her voice. The expectation that I'd either beg her to stay or make myself smaller so she'd feel bigger. Surprise, I said. Ernesto smiled wider. Then let's make it memorable. Over the next 10 days, I prepared like I was managing a product launch. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and rerouted my direct deposit. I moved half the balance from our joint savings into my personal account, which was exactly my legal share. I canceled the joint credit card we barely used and paid off the balance. I contacted the mortgage lender and started the process to refinance in my name alone, which would take months but send a message about intent. I pulled all the important documents from our shared files. Birth certificate, passport, tax returns, insurance policies. I stored them in a fireproof lockbox I kept at my office. Isabel noticed none of it. She was busy with her own calendar, her own plans, her own version of a life that didn't seem to include me except as a background fixture. On the 13th day, Ernesto called. "Papers are ready," he said. "How do you want to deliver them?" "In person," I said. "At home?" "You want to hand them to her yourself?" "I do." He paused. "Most people don't. Most people use a process server to avoid the confrontation. I'm not most people." He laughed. "No, Carlo. You're definitely not." The papers arrived by courier the next afternoon in a plain manila envelope. I set them on my desk and looked at them for a full minute before opening the seal. Inside were the dissolution documents, clean and official, with highlighted tabs marking where Isabel needed to sign. There was also a letter from Ernesto outlining the terms. No fault dissolution, equal division of joint assets, no alimony requested, timeline for property settlement pending refinancing or sale. It was fair. It was efficient. It was final. I put the papers back in the envelope and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, underneath a stack of old user manuals I never looked at. That night, Isabel came home late again. She said she'd been at a team happy hour. She smelled like wine and someone else's cologne, faint but there. She kissed my cheek and said she was going to bed early. I told her I'd be up in a bit. She went upstairs and I heard the shower start. I sat in the living room with the lights off and the sound of water running through the ceiling, and I thought about the version of myself who would have believed her. Who would have taken the explanations at face value and convinced himself that everything was fine because confrontation felt worse than uncertainty. That version of me died somewhere between the hotel lobby and Ernesto's office, and I didn't mourn him. The version sitting in the dark now was someone different. Someone who trusted patterns over promises. Someone who knew that the hardest part of ending something wasn't the ending itself. It was admitting you should have ended it sooner. I went upstairs an hour later. Isabel was asleep with her phone charging on the nightstand, face down as always. I changed in the dark, got into bed on my side, and stared at the ceiling until my eyes adjusted. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow it starts. But tomorrow didn't come with fireworks or confrontation. Tomorrow came with routines. Coffee in the kitchen, traffic on the commute, emails that needed answers, meetings that solved nothing. Isabel left early for the gym that she wasn't going to. I went to the office and reviewed logistics reports and answered questions from my team about shipment delays in the Midwest. At lunch, I sat in my car in the parking garage and opened the folder on my phone one more time. I scrolled through the photos, the screenshots, the timeline I'd built. Not because I needed to see it again. Because I wanted to remember why clarity mattered more than comfort. Then I deleted nothing, closed the app, and went back to work. That night, when I came home, Isabel was in the kitchen making pasta. She smiled when I walked in, the kind of smile that used to make me feel like I'd walked into the right place. Now it just looked like performance. "Good day?" she asked, stirring the pot. "Productive," I said, setting my bag down. "You?" "Busy. Always busy." She laughed lightly. "I'm thinking we should take a trip soon. Get out of here for a weekend. Maybe the coast. We haven't done that in forever." "Maybe," I said. She turned to look at me, spatula in hand. "You don't sound excited." "I'm tired." "You're always tired lately," she said, and there was something underneath her tone. Something that sounded like accusation dressed as concern. "Work's been heavy," I said. She turned back to the stove. Well, think about it. I think we need it. I'll think about it, I said, knowing I wouldn't. We ate dinner at the table in near silence. She talked about her day in vague terms that didn't include names or details. I responded with sounds that weren't quite words. When we finished, she loaded the dishwasher while I wiped down the counters, and the whole thing felt like choreography we'd perfected and stopped meaning. Later that week, she announced she had another conference. This time in Atlanta. 3 days, Monday through Wednesday. She printed her boarding pass, packed her bag, checked the weather on her phone while I watched from the doorway of our bedroom. "You need anything while I'm gone?" she asked, zipping the suitcase. "I'm good," I said. She stood and kissed me quickly. "I'll text you when I land." "Safe flight," I said. She left Monday morning, and I spent the evening doing what I always did when she traveled. I made dinner for one, caught up on work emails, walked through the house checking locks and lights. Except this time, I also opened my laptop and checked her location. She landed in Atlanta on schedule. Her phone pinged from the airport, then from a hotel near the convention center. Tuesday morning it stayed at the hotel. Tuesday night it moved to a restaurant 3 miles away. Wednesday afternoon it showed her at the airport again, right on time for her flight home. Everything lined up. Everything made sense. Which made me more suspicious than if it hadn't. She came home Wednesday night with her roller bag and a branded conference tote filled with pens and notepads no one would ever use. She looked refreshed. Energized. Like she'd been somewhere that fed her in a way home didn't. "How was it?" I asked. "Good," she said, dropping the bag by the stairs. Networking was solid. Learned some new strategies for the Southeast region. Boring stuff. "Glad it was worth it," I said. She looked at me for a beat longer than necessary, like she was trying to read something in my face she couldn't quite find. Then she smiled. "I'm going to shower." "Take your time," I said. After she went upstairs, I opened her conference tote and pulled out the notepads. I flipped through them. Blank. Every single page. No session notes, no contact info, no doodles from sitting through presentations. Just empty paper and shrink wrap that had never been opened. I put them back exactly how I found them and went to the kitchen to pour myself water. Friday came with the kind of normalcy that felt like a test. We had dinner plans with another couple, Dan and Maria, people we'd known since before we got married. They were the kind of friends who asked how you were doing and actually waited for the answer. We met them at a bistro downtown, one of those places with small plates and big prices and waitstaff who describe every ingredient like it's a biographical sketch. Isabel was charming all night. She laughed at Dan's jokes, asked Maria about her new promotion, complimented the food, refilled my water glass when it got low. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple who still liked each other. And maybe we did, in the shallow way you like someone whose routines fit yours but whose actual presence you've stopped noticing. Halfway through the meal, Isabel excused herself to the restroom. Maria leaned across the table the second she was out of earshot. "Is everything okay with you too?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. "Why? You just seem distant tonight." "Both of you." Dan nodded. "She's talking a lot, but you're barely here." "I'm here," I said. "Just tired." Maria reached over and squeezed my hand. "If you ever need to talk, you know we're around." I appreciated that, I said, meaning it. When Isabel came back, she slid into her seat and picked up her fork like nothing had paused. The rest of dinner passed without incident. We paid, said our goodbyes, promised to do it again soon. In the car on the way home, Isabel stared out the window. "That was nice," she said. "It was," I agreed. "We should see them more often." "We should." She turned to look at me. "You were quiet tonight." "I'm always quiet." "Not like that," she said. "You barely said 10 words." I didn't have much to add. She faced forward again. "Well, it felt weird." I didn't respond. I just drove, and she didn't push. When we got home, she went straight to bed. I stayed downstairs and opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder again, scrolled to the bottom, and added a new note. Friday, August 18th, dinner with Dan and Maria. She noticed I was distant. Didn't ask why. I saved the file and closed the laptop. Then I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the house settle, and decided it was time. Saturday morning, I woke up before Isabel. I made coffee, checked my email, reviewed the documents one more time to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Everything was in order. Everything was ready. When she came downstairs an hour later, she was in her robe, hair tied back, face soft with sleep. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Just catching up," I said. "On a Saturday? Time doesn't stop on weekends." She rolled her eyes. "You're such a workaholic. One of us has to be." She looked at me sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said. "Just an observation." She set her mug down. "You've been weird all week, Carlo. What's going on?" I closed my laptop and looked at her fully for the first time that morning. "We need to talk." Her expression shifted. The softness drained out and something guarded took its place. "Okay," she said slowly. "About what?" I stood, walked to my office, and came back with the manila envelope. I set it on the counter between us. She stared at it. "What is that?" "Open it," I said. Her hands hesitated before picking it up. She pulled out the papers, scanned the first page, and her face went white. "Carlo, what is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like." She looked up at me, eyes wide, voice rising. "You're filing for divorce?" "I am." "Why?" I didn't answer immediately. I just watched her, the same way I'd been watching for months. Looking for the moment she'd tell the truth instead of reaching for another deflection. She didn't. She went straight to defense. "This is insane," she said, shaking the papers. "You can't just do this without talking to me first." "I am talking to you. Right now." "No," she snapped. "Talking means a conversation. This is an ambush." "This is a conclusion," I said evenly. "One I reached after months of watching you lie." Her jaw dropped. "I have never lied to you." I pulled out my phone, opened the documentation folder, and turned the screen toward her. She looked down at the first photo. The one from the hotel lobby. Her and the man in the suit. The timestamp in the corner. The date that matched the Saturday she'd canceled dinner with her parents for work. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "Carlo," she whispered. I swiped to the next photo. Then the next. The calendar screenshots showing blank entries where she'd said she had plans. The location pings from places she'd told me she wasn't. The credit card charges she'd never mentioned. The flight that wasn't delayed. The gym bag that was never full. She sat down hard on the stool, papers still in her hand, phone still in mine. "I didn't do this to hurt you," I said. "I did this because I needed to know. And now I do." She looked up at me, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw something real in her face. Not guilt. Not shame. Just exhaustion. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly. "When?" She didn't answer. I took the phone back and put it in my pocket. "The papers are fair. Equal split, clean terms, no drama. You can have your lawyer review them, but you'll see I'm not trying to take anything from you that isn't mine." She wiped her eyes even though she wasn't crying yet. "This is really it? This is really it?" She nodded slowly, like she was accepting something she'd known was coming but hadn't wanted to face. Then she stood, picked up the envelope, and walked upstairs without another word. I stayed in the kitchen. I poured another cup of coffee. I looked out the window at the backyard I never used, the fence that needed painting, the grass that would need mowing in a few days. And I felt nothing but relief. She stayed upstairs for 3 hours. I heard the shower run twice, heard drawers open and close, heard her voice muffled through the floor talking to someone on the phone. I didn't go up. I didn't check on her. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, responding to work emails that didn't need immediate attention but gave me something to do with my hands. Around 2 in the afternoon, she came down dressed in jeans and a sweater, face washed clean, hair pulled into a ponytail. She looked younger without makeup, more like the woman I'd met at that wedding 7 years ago. She sat across from me at the table and folded her hands like she was about to deliver a presentation. "I read through everything," she said. Her voice was steady, controlled. "I'll sign." I nodded. "Good." She looked at me, searching for something. "That's it? Just good? What else is there to say, Isabel?" She laughed, but it came out sharp. "I don't know, Carlo. Maybe something human? Maybe ask me why. Maybe tell me you're hurt or angry or something other than this robotic calm you've got going." I closed the laptop. "You want me to perform emotion so you feel less guilty about what you did? That's not fair." "None of this is fair," I said. "But I'm not interested in a scene. You made choices. I documented them. Now we move forward." She shook her head slowly. "You really are something, you know that? Most people would be falling apart right now. Most people don't spend their careers identifying problems and solving them efficiently. This isn't a logistics problem, Carlo. This is our marriage." "Was our marriage," I corrected. "Past tense." She flinched at that, and for a second I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just sat there, hands still folded, looking at the table like it held answers. "His name is Vincent," she said quietly. "We met at a conference 8 months ago. It wasn't supposed to happen. I don't need details." "Well, maybe I need to give them," she said, voice rising slightly. "Maybe I need you to understand that I didn't plan this. I didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin everything." "But you did ruin it," I said. "Planning doesn't change the outcome." She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "God, you're impossible. Do you even care? Do you feel anything at all?" "I feel relieved," I said, meeting her eyes. "I feel like I've been waiting for confirmation of something I already knew, and now I have it. That's what I feel." She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her purse from the counter. "I'm going out." "Where? Does it matter?" "It doesn't," I said. "But for the record, you don't need to tell me anymore. We're not doing that part anymore." She left without another word, and I heard her car pull out of the driveway faster than necessary. I sat in the silence for a while, then picked up my phone and called Ernesto. "She's signing," I told him when he answered. "That was fast," he said. "How did she take it?" "About as well as expected. Defensive, then resigned." "Any indication she'll fight the terms?" "No. She read everything. Said she'll sign." "Good. I'll prepare the final documents. Once she signs and we file, you're looking at a 90-day waiting period before it's finalized. Standard procedure." "Understood. How are you holding up, Carlo?" "I'm fine." He paused. "You know, most of my clients aren't fine at this stage. They're a mess. You're unnaturally calm." "I've had months to process this," I said. "By the time I handed her those papers, I was already done." "Well," he said, "that's either very healthy or very concerning. I haven't decided which. I'll let you know in 90 days. He laughed. "Fair enough. I'll be in touch." That evening, Isabel didn't come home. She texted around 8 saying she was staying with a friend and would be back tomorrow to get some things. I replied with a simple okay and went about my night. I made dinner for one, watched a documentary about warehouse automation, took the dog for a walk around the block. The house felt different without her in it. Not empty, Just accurate. Like it had been pretending to be something it wasn't, and now it could stop. Sunday morning, she returned with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. I was in the garage organizing storage bins when I heard her car pull up. She came in through the side door, saw me, and stopped. "I'm just here to pack," she said. "I won't be long." "Take your time," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She went upstairs and I heard her moving around in the bedroom, opening closets, pulling items from drawers. I stayed in the garage and continued sorting through old cables and tools I'd been meaning to deal with for months. It felt good to throw things away. Freeing. An hour later, she came down with her bags and set them by the front door. She stood in the doorway to the garage, arms crossed, watching me work. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "When did you stop loving me?" I set down the box I was holding and looked at her. "I didn't stop. I just stopped believing you loved me back." She bit her lip. "I did love you. I do love you. You have a strange way of showing it." She looked away. "I know." I picked up the box again and moved it to the donation pile. "If that's everything you wanted to ask, I've got work to do." She nodded slowly, then walked back inside. A few minutes later, I heard the front door close and her car start. I didn't go inside to watch her leave. I just kept sorting. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. I went to work, managed my team, handled projects that needed attention. At home, I meal prepped on Sundays, kept the house clean, maintained the yard. I removed Isabel from every shared account, every streaming service, every subscription we'd split. I changed the locks not because I thought she'd come back, but because it was the practical thing to do. I updated my emergency contacts, my insurance beneficiaries, my will. I treated the dissolution like a project with a clear scope and deliverables, and I executed it without drama. People at work noticed something had changed. My assistant, a sharp woman named Lydia who'd been with the company longer than I had, cornered me one afternoon in the break room. "You're different lately," she said, pouring herself coffee. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like someone lifted a weight off you." I shrugged. "Just clearing out some clutter in my life." She smiled knowingly. "Good for you. Clutter is overrated." At home, I started projects I'd been putting off. I repainted the guest bedroom that Isabel had insisted stay a specific shade of gray I'd never liked. I replaced it with a warm beige that made the room feel bigger. I rearranged the living room furniture to face the windows instead of the television, which changed the entire energy of the space. I bought new sheets, new towels, new kitchen equipment that was mine and not ours. Every change felt like reclaiming territory. One evening, Dan called. He didn't mention Isabel's name, didn't ask what happened. He just said he and Maria were grabbing drinks Friday and wanted to know if I was free. I said yes without hesitation. We met at a quiet bar downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting and good whiskey and bartenders who don't talk unless you want them to. Dan ordered a round and we sat in a corner booth. "So," he said after the first sip. "You doing okay?" "I'm good," I said. Maria leaned forward. "We heard. Through the grapevine. We wanted to reach out, but we didn't want to overstep." "You're not overstepping." She squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Carlo. I know that doesn't help, but I mean it. I appreciate it." Dan raised his glass. "To new chapters." We clinked glasses and drank, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Work, sports, a vacation they were planning. It felt good to sit with people who didn't need me to explain or justify or perform grief I didn't feel. When the night ended, Dan pulled me aside while Maria was in the restroom. "If you need anything," he said. "Seriously. Even just someone to sit with. Call me." "I will," I said, and I meant it. September came with cooler weather and a shift in routine. Isabel's lawyer reached out to Ernesto with a few minor requests about the division of assets. Nothing contentious, just clarifications on who got what. We negotiated through our lawyers like professionals handling a business transaction, and within a week everything was settled. She took her car, her clothes, her personal items, and half the savings. I kept the townhouse, the dog, and the furniture. It was clean. It was fair. It was done. The waiting period stretched ahead like a formality. 90 days from filing to finalization. Ernesto told me most people found those 3 months excruciating, caught between what was and what would be. But I didn't feel caught. I felt released. I started going to the gym in the mornings before work, not because I needed to lose weight or build muscle, but because I liked the structure. I liked starting the day with something I controlled. I ran on the treadmill with headphones in, listening to podcasts about supply chain innovations and economic forecasting. I lifted weights in a methodical progression that reminded me of my job. Identify the baseline, increase incrementally, measure progress. One morning in late September, I ran into someone from Isabel's old social circle. A woman named Grace who used to come to our dinner parties with her husband. She was on the elliptical next to my treadmill, and when she saw me she did that awkward half-wave people do when they're not sure if you want to be acknowledged. I nodded and kept running. She finished her workout and waited by the water fountain until I was done. When I walked over, she smiled apologetically. "Carlo, hi." I wasn't sure if I should say anything. "It's fine," I said, filling my bottle. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened. Isabel and I aren't close anymore, but I heard through mutual friends. I appreciate that." She hesitated, then added quietly, "For what it's worth, a lot of us thought you two were solid." It was a surprise. "Life's full of those," I said. She nodded. "Well, you look good. Healthy." "Thank you." She left it at that, and I was grateful. I didn't need her analysis or her sympathy. I just needed to finish my workout and get to the office. At work, things were busy in the way that keeps you focused. We were managing a major contract renewal with one of our largest clients, and the pressure was high. My team looked to me for direction, for calm, for solutions when problems emerged. I gave them all three because that's what I was good at. I ran point on client calls, reviewed performance metrics, adjusted timelines when shipments got delayed. I was present in a way I hadn't been in months, maybe years. Lydia noticed. She stopped by my office one afternoon with a report I'd requested and set it on my desk. "You're back," she said. "I was gone. You were here, but you weren't present. Now you are." I looked up at her. "Is that a compliment or an observation?" "Both," she said with a smile. "Whatever you did, keep doing it." After she left, I sat with that for a moment. She was right. I had been gone. Not physically, but mentally. I'd been so focused on managing Isabel's chaos, on tracking her inconsistencies, on preparing for an ending I knew was coming, that I'd let my actual life become secondary. Now that she was out of the picture, I had bandwidth again. Clarity. Energy for things that mattered. October arrived with falling leaves and shorter days. The townhouse felt like mine now. I'd replaced the last of the shared items, updated the decor to reflect my taste instead of compromise, and established routines that suited me. I cooked meals I wanted to eat. I watched shows I actually enjoyed. I went to bed when I was tired and woke up when my body said it was time. It was simple, and simple felt revolutionary. One Saturday, I was at a hardware store picking up supplies for a fence repair when I saw her. Isabel. She was in the paint aisle with a man I recognized from the hotel lobby photos. Vincent. They were laughing about something, comparing paint swatches like they were furnishing a life together. She looked happy. Lighter than I'd seen her in years. I could have walked over. Could have said something cutting or cold or confrontational. But I didn't. I just observed them for a moment, noted the way she touched his arm when she laughed, the way he leaned into her space naturally. Then I turned and walked to the register with my supplies. It didn't hurt. It didn't make me angry. It just confirmed what I already knew. She'd moved on long before I handed her those papers. I was just catching up. At the register, the cashier made small talk about the weather. I responded politely, paid, and left. On the drive home, I didn't think about Isabel or Vincent or what they were building together. I thought about the fence I was about to fix, the measurements I needed to double-check, the satisfaction of completing something tangible. That evening, Dan texted asking if I wanted to grab dinner. I said yes, and we met at a burger place near his neighborhood. Maria joined us, and we spent 2 hours talking about nothing important. Their vacation plans, a new restaurant they wanted to try, a mutual friend's engagement. It was easy. Comfortable. Normal. As we were leaving, Maria hugged me. "You seem really good, Carlo." "I am," I said, and I meant it. November brought the 60-day mark. Ernesto sent me an email with an update. Everything was on track. No complications, no delays. Isabel had been cooperative throughout the process. The final hearing was scheduled for early December, a formality where a judge would review the settlement and sign off. I'd need to appear, but it would be brief. I responded thanking him for the update and went back to work. Thanksgiving week, I got an invitation from Dan and Maria to join them for dinner. They were hosting a small gathering and didn't want me spending the holiday alone. I appreciated the gesture but declined politely. I told them I was planning a quiet day, some projects around the house, maybe a long drive. The truth was I didn't feel alone. I felt independent, which was different. I spent Thanksgiving morning running errands, then came home and made a meal for myself. Nothing elaborate, just roasted chicken and vegetables and a beer I'd been saving. I ate at the kitchen table with a book propped open, and when I finished I cleaned up and went for a walk. The neighborhood was quiet, most people inside with family. I walked for an hour, hands in my pockets, breath visible in the cold air, and I felt content in a way I hadn't in years. That night, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. The message said, "Hi Carlo, this is Grace from the gym. I hope this isn't weird. I got your number from the old group chat. Just wanted to wish you a happy Thanksgiving." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "Not weird. Thanks, Grace. Hope yours was good too." She replied immediately. It was. "Listen, if you ever want to grab coffee sometime, let me know. No pressure, just thought it might be nice to catch up." I considered it. Grace had always been kind, easy to talk to, someone who didn't create drama. I typed, "Sure, that sounds good. I'll reach out next week." She sent back a smiley face and that was it. I set the phone down and didn't think about it again that night. December came fast. The final hearing was scheduled for the 10th, a Tuesday morning at 9. Ernesto confirmed the details by email and reminded me to bring identification. I marked it on my calendar and didn't tell anyone. It wasn't a secret, but it also wasn't something I needed to announce. The week before the hearing, I cleaned the townhouse top to bottom. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted everything in order. I vacuumed, scrubbed, organized, threw out anything I didn't need. I went through the garage and donated tools I never used. I cleared out the closets and boxed up items for charity. By the time I was done, the house felt lighter. Intentional. Mine. On Monday night, I ironed a shirt for the hearing, set out my jacket, made sure my car had gas. I went to bed early and slept deeply. When my alarm went off at 6, I got up without hesitation. The courthouse was downtown, a gray building with too many stairs and not enough parking. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited in the hallway outside the courtroom. Ernesto showed up a few minutes later with his briefcase and his usual calm demeanor. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for months." He smiled. "That's what I like to hear." Isabel arrived at 8:50 with her lawyer, a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Isabel wore a simple dress and minimal makeup. She didn't look at me when she walked in, just took a seat on the opposite side of the hallway. We waited in silence until a clerk called us into the courtroom. The judge was a man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on his nose and a voice that sounded like he'd done this 1,000 times before. He reviewed the documents, asked us both a series of standard questions, confirmed we understood the terms and agreed to the settlement. The whole thing took 12 minutes. When he signed the final order, he looked at both of us over his glasses. "This dissolution is now finalized. You're both free to move forward. I wish you well." We stood, thanked him, and walked out. In the hallway, Isabel's lawyer shook Ernesto's hand and left quickly. Isabel lingered for a moment, her purse clutched in front of her like a shield. "Carlo," she said quietly. I stopped and looked at her. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I nodded. "I appreciate that." She hesitated, then added, "Are you okay?" "I'm good," I said. "I hope you are too." She smiled, small and sad. "I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do." She nodded and walked away, heels clicking against the tile floor. I watched her go, then turned to Ernesto. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it," he said. "You're officially single again." I shook his hand. "Thank you for everything." "My pleasure, Carlo. If you ever need anything else, you know where to find me." I walked out of the courthouse into the cold December air and took a deep breath. The sky was overcast, the streets busy with traffic, the world moving like it always did. I got in my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment. It was done. Finalized. Over. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt ready. I drove back to the office and went to work. Lydia was at her desk when I walked in, and she looked up with a smile. "How'd it go?" she asked. "It went," I said. "All finished." "Good," she said. "Now you can focus on what's next." I walked into my office, set down my jacket, and opened my laptop. She was right. It was time to focus on what was next. And for the first time in years, what was next was entirely up to me. That evening, I texted Grace. "Coffee this week?" She replied within minutes. "How about Thursday? There's a place near my office that's great." "Thursday works. Send me the address." She did, and I saved it to my calendar. Then I set my phone down and looked around the townhouse. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like space. Space to think, to breathe, to build something that was mine. I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, and turned on the television. The dog curled up next to me, and I scratched his ears while I watched the news. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the windows. Inside, everything was still. This was it. The other side of the ending. The place where life started again, not with fireworks or grand gestures, but with small decisions that added up to something better. I finished my drink, turned off the television, and went to bed. Tomorrow would come with its own tasks and challenges and opportunities. But tonight, I was done processing. Done waiting. Done looking back. I was ready to move forward, one measured step at a time, into whatever came next. Thursday arrived with clear skies and temperatures cold enough to justify the wool coat I'd bought myself the week before. I met Grace at the coffee shop she'd suggested, a small place with exposed brick and mismatched furniture that felt more like someone's living room than a business. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with 2 cups in front of her. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got you a black coffee," she said as I sat down. "If that's wrong, I'll drink it and you can order something else." "Black's perfect," I said, wrapping my hands around the cup. We talked easily, which surprised me. She asked about work and I told her about the contract renewal we'd just secured. She told me about her job managing a nonprofit that provided job training for adults re-entering the workforce. The conversation flowed without effort, without the careful navigation I'd grown used to with Isabel. When Grace laughed, it was genuine. When she listened, she actually heard what I was saying instead of waiting for her turn to speak. An hour passed before I realized it. I glanced at my watch and she caught the movement. "Do you need to go?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just didn't realize how long we'd been talking." "Good talking doesn't watch the clock," she said with a smile. We stayed another 30 minutes, and when we finally left, she walked with me toward the parking garage where I'd left my car. At the entrance, she stopped and adjusted her scarf. "This was really nice, Carlo. I'm glad you reached out." "Me too," I said. She hesitated, then added, "I know this might be too soon, but if you'd ever want to do dinner sometime, I'd like that." No pressure, just putting it out there. I looked at her, at the openness in her expression, at the absence of games or hidden agendas. "Dinner sounds good," I said. "Let me check my schedule and I'll text you some options." "Perfect," she said, and she meant it. I drove back to the office thinking about how different that conversation had been from the ones I'd had in my marriage. There was no subtext to decode, no calendar to cross-reference, no feeling that I needed to verify anything she'd said. It was just two people talking, and that simplicity felt like oxygen after years of holding my breath. That weekend, I finalized the fence repair I'd started months ago. The work was straightforward, replacing rotted posts and reinforcing the structure so it would last another decade. I measured twice, cut once, and when I stepped back to look at the finished product, I felt the kind of satisfaction that comes from fixing something that was broken. Sunday afternoon, Dan stopped by unannounced with a six-pack and an excuse about being in the neighborhood. We sat in the backyard even though it was cold, and he looked at the fence. "You did that yourself?" he asked. "I did. Looks solid." "It is." He opened a beer and handed me one. "So," he said casually, "Maria mentioned you might be seeing someone." I raised an eyebrow. "Maria has good intel." "Is it serious?" "It's coffee so far. Maybe dinner. We'll see." He nodded approvingly. "Good for you. You deserve something uncomplicated." "That's the goal," I said. We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching the neighbors' kids play basketball in their driveway. When Dan left an hour later, he clapped me on the shoulder and told me to call if I needed anything. I told him I would, and I knew he believed me. December continued with a rhythm I'd built for myself. Work stayed demanding but manageable. I took Grace to dinner the following week at an Italian place she'd been wanting to try. We split a bottle of wine and talked about everything except our pasts. She didn't ask about Isabel, and I didn't volunteer information. When the check came, I paid without making a show of it, and she thanked me without making it complicated. Outside the restaurant, she tucked her hands in her coat pockets and looked up at me. "I had a really good time tonight." "So did I said. She smiled. "Same time next week?" "I'll make it happen." On the drive home, I realized I was looking forward to next week. Not with anxiety or obligation, but with actual anticipation. That felt new. That felt right. Christmas came with invitations I declined politely. Dan and Maria wanted me at their house. My parents called from Arizona asking if I'd fly out. Coworkers organized a party I had no interest in attending. I spent the day alone by choice, not isolation. I made a meal I enjoyed, watched movies I'd been meaning to see, and went for a long walk in the evening when the neighborhood was quiet and covered in lights. When I got home, Grace had texted, "Merry Christmas, Carlo. Hope you're having a peaceful day." I replied, "It's been good. Hope yours is too." She sent back a photo of her family gathered around a table, everyone smiling, chaos in the best way. I looked at it for a moment, then set my phone down. Someday, maybe I'd be ready for that kind of chaos again. But not yet. Not today. The new year arrived without fanfare. I didn't make resolutions or declarations. I just kept doing what I'd been doing. Work, gym, maintenance on the townhouse, dinners with Grace that were becoming regular enough to feel like something real but not so frequent that it felt rushed. She never pushed. Never asked where this was going or what I was feeling. She just showed up consistently, and I appreciated that more than she probably knew. In late January, she invited me to her place for the first time. It was a small apartment in a converted warehouse, all high ceilings and large windows and furniture that looked comfortable rather than curated. She cooked dinner while I opened the wine, and we ate at her kitchen island while she told me about a client success story that had made her week. "You're good at what you do," I said. She shrugged. "I just care about the people I work with. Makes it easier. That's more than most people do." She looked at me over her glass. "You care about what you do too." "I can tell. It's different. My work is systems and numbers. Yours is people. People are just another system," she said. "You figure out what they need, give them the tools, and watch them succeed. You do the same thing, just with supply chains instead of humans." I smiled. That's one way to look at it. After dinner, we sat on her couch and talked until midnight. When I said I should go, she walked me to the door and kissed me. It was brief, simple, and it felt like the beginning of something I hadn't known I was ready for. "Drive safe," she said. "I will," I said, and I meant it. February brought warmer weather and a promotion at work. My manager called me into his office and told me they were creating a new director position for supply chain optimization, and they wanted me to take it. More responsibility, better pay, a team I'd build from the ground up. I accepted without hesitation. That evening, I told Grace over dinner. She raised her glass immediately. "To new beginnings," she said. We clinked glasses and I felt something shift. Not dramatically, but noticeably. I was building a life I actually wanted instead of maintaining one I'd inherited. Every piece I added was intentional. Every decision was mine. Months passed. Grace and I fell into a pattern that worked for both of us. We saw each other twice a week, sometimes more, never less. We kept our own spaces, our own routines, our own independence. She met Dan and Maria and they approved immediately. I met her friends and they treated me like I'd always been part of the group. It was easy in a way I'd forgotten relationships could be. One evening in late spring, we were walking through a park near her apartment when she stopped at a bench and sat down. I joined her, and we watched joggers pass and dogs chase tennis balls. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Do you ever think about her?" I considered the question. "Sometimes," I said. "Not often. Not in a way that hurts." "Do you regret how it ended?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I regret how long I let it go on before I ended it. But the ending itself was necessary." She nodded. "I'm glad you did what you did. Not because it brought you to me, though I'm obviously glad about that. But because you respected yourself enough to walk away." I looked at her. "You're different from what I was used to." "Good different?" "Very good different." She leaned her head on my shoulder and we sat like that until the sun started setting. When we walked back to her apartment, she took my hand, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Summer arrived and I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about Isabel. Not because I was trying to forget, but because she'd simply stopped being relevant. The townhouse was fully mine now. The routines were mine. The life I was living was mine. She was part of my history, but she wasn't part of my present, and that distinction mattered. One Saturday, I ran into her at a farmer's market. She was with Vincent, and they were looking at produce like they'd done this 100 times before. She saw me first and her face shifted through several expressions before landing on something neutral. "Carlo," she said. "Hi." "Isabel," I said evenly. Vincent extended his hand. "Vincent. Good to meet you." I shook it. "Likewise." We stood there for an awkward beat, and then Isabel said, "You look well." "So do you," I said, and I meant it. She looked happy. Settled. Like she'd found what she was looking for. "We should catch up sometime," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't really mean it. Maybe, I said, knowing we wouldn't. She nodded, said it was good to see me, and they walked away. I watched them go for a second, then turned back to the vendor I'd been talking to before the interruption. Grace came up beside me with a bag of tomatoes and linked her arm through mine. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm perfect," I said. And I was. Life continued forward, not in dramatic leaps but in steady increments. Grace and I moved in together a year after that first coffee, combining our spaces into something that felt like ours. I proposed on a quiet evening at home, no grand gestures, just a simple question that she answered with a yes that filled the room. We married in a small ceremony with people who mattered, and when I looked at her across the table at our reception, I thought about the line Isabel had delivered in my office doorway years ago. I deserve better than this. She'd been right. She did deserve better. And so did I. The difference was, I'd actually gone out and built it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.